done a committee meeting.
But I'll call the committee meeting. This is the CBWD Finance Committee, reconstituted.
First one in
It's
a
our
while.
first meeting in a while, yes. And it's April 3rd, 2025. Why don't we stand in for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Does that include Greenland yet? I don't remember. It's over there yet, are we?
I don't think so.
Roll call.
Yes, good morning. President Powell
Yeah. I'm
and
here.
Director Aguilar. That's it. Okay. We technically have
Is
a
there any
quorum.
public wishing to make a public comment at this time? Seeing none. All right, so there's 4 items of discussion at this Finance Committee meeting. Carla, why don't you kick us off?
This is also my first Finance Committee meeting here at CBWD. So hoping that we brought agenda items that are appropriate for the committee to discuss before we take them to the board. We do have a couple of external participants for items A, B, and C. We're going to start off with the 2025 Domestic Water Plan of Finance. This was brought to the board on February 18th, 2025 for discussion, where we discussed either rolling or refinancing the 2022 domestic note or doing a line of credit or a debt issuance directly with the bank. Since then, we have issued an RFP, and we are moving forward with a credit agreement with a bank. And so PFM is on the line to provide an update of what has occurred since the February 18th meeting.
Yeah, thanks. Can you remind me, who is the note holder on this 2022?
It's a domestic note, so it's a bond issuance, essentially.
It's a bond issuance? Okay. So the note holders are, or the bond holders are whoever
Correct.
got the bond?
And Darren, are you on the line?
I am. Good morning.
Morning, Darren.
And Carla, did you want me to start walking through the presentation?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. I just want to make sure are you sharing it on the screen on your end?
Yeah, hold on just a minute. Darren, staff, can you put the PowerPoint on so they can see it? There we go. Thank you.
Can you see that now, Darren? Thank you.
Yep. Excellent. Well, good morning, y'all. Thank you for having us here today. Wanted to give you an update on the role of the 2022 notes, as well as a update on the financing strategy related to domestic water for 2025-26. So just a quick recap. If you remember, as Carla mentioned, we issued the 2022 notes back in 2022, really to provide construction or interim financing for a number of projects that we are intending and were intending at the time to finance long-term with low-cost USDA loans and also to fund with grants. Now, those notes, as we'll talk about, have a maturity on June 1st, 2025. So the plan of finance that we're updating you on today accomplishes that goal to make sure that those notes are rolled to provide flexibility and also address the maturity. In addition, the second part of the discussion is going to be talking about the additional domestic water new money needs, how we're anticipating funding those to give flexibility into the next several years. So if we turn to slide 3, again, I'll just go through this quickly, but more detail on the notes. They were issued in the par amount of about $35 million. That funded $33 million of projects. It funded capitalized interest during the construction period and paid some issuance expenses. They have a maturity date of June 1st, 2025, meaning we need to roll these before that date as our schedule accomplishes. But essentially, it's just important that we meet that target date. And as we'll talk about in the next slide, our recommended plan of finance here gives us some flexibility given the use of the proceeds of the notes. So if we turn to slide 4, this just gives us an overview of the 2 different letters of condition that we have. So we have the 2 USDA loans. The first is for about $2.14 million. That's for the reservoir construction project. The second letter of conditions, the second USDA loan, is a little bit higher, $22.7 million. for North Shore, Dale Kyler, and 3 of the booster pump stations. In addition, we've also broken out the grant funds here that we anticipate receiving for these projects. So on slide 5, in addition to the notes, we've got these new money needs that we're anticipating here through 2028. It includes the additional cost associated with the projects that are going to be funded with the USDA loans, but also just other ancillary and additional domestic water new money needs. Now, given the timing and the cost of these CIP needs, we were originally contemplating financing these at the same time we rolled the notes. However, given our recommended plan of finance here, we don't think it's necessary now to finance all of these projects, which gives us some additional flexibility. And a key component of that is the funds that we have available for interim financing, as we'll talk about. If we turn to slide 6, the overall plan of finance for the next 2 years has 2 components. The first, again, is we need to roll the 2022A notes before June 1st of 25. And so the current schedule contemplates that late April, first thing in May, to essentially roll that with a 3-year bank loan from JP Morgan. So essentially we will take the maturity of June 1st, 2025 and move that to 2028 to give us additional time to complete the projects, which is a requirement for us to be able to draw on the USDA loans and receive the USDA grants. Now for the additional new money needs, what we're contemplating is that over the next year, some of the new money project costs that we have on domestic water, we recommend funding those with interfund loans if it's needed. And essentially what that would allow us to do is preserve the flexibility to finance those with long-term bonds if needed later down the road in May 2026. And in May 2026, this is the earliest date by which we would contemplate potentially issuing new money bonds. And in addition, this would be the time in which we would be able to refund a portion of the notes that we roll. And the portion of notes that we roll would be the portions that were used for non-USDA projects. So I'm going to pause there before we jump into the next slide and just see, Carla, is there anything you wanted to add here?
Do you want me to go over the projects that are associated with each one of the new debt versus the USDA, thing like that? I think we talked about it at the last go around as well in February.
While John's thinking about that, Darren, just, sorry to interrupt, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are we, the USDA loan and grant, would they be able to cover any of the financing costs, or are those solely intended for the construction?
I believe they're solely for the construction. I think we need to cover the financing costs.
Okay. Thought that might help, but no.
I probably would rather, I know, I think we covered this already, but just to kind of remind me, what was it that, I mean, we thought we would have these projects done in that 3-year window, and that didn't happen, at least for most of it. What was the driver on that? I mean, it's probably different pieces have different reasons, right?
Yes, so they did complete the North Shore project. That one is completed now or about to complete this spring. The Dow Kyler project had some dewatering issues. I don't know the details. I'm sorry, not an engineer, but Jim might know a little bit more of that. And the booster stations have not been put out to bid yet, the 3 booster stations within the USDA project.
Yeah, it really came down to the fact that, don't know whether it was us or the contractor or the design or engineer of record underestimated the amount of dewatering that had to be done. And so we have environmental documents that basically kind of cover the work that's supposed to be done. Unfortunately, because of the amount of groundwater that had to be pumped out, we then had to basically percolate that, dispose of it. The environmental documents didn't cover that, so that created another delay. As I recall, that was the biggest issue. And then I don't know whether there were actual material availability problems. It just had to do with how the contractor prosecuted the work and then tied up with all these other administrative details that tend to make construction so easy these days. That was the big draw. There were also delays in getting USDA to approve change orders moving forward. We talked about that in open session. But those were the big things. Administrative delays, essentially wrapped up in the
Yeah, because, we don't really get a sense through this presentation of what our additional costs are as a result of these delays. I don't have a sense of it, obviously we've engaged a variety of additional consultants to help us bridge this time gap, and I don't know what that costs. I'd like to know.
There's also construction cost increases. I know that we need about $1.7 million more for one of the reservoirs, and so we've asked for additional funding for that particular project. Darren and I actually did speak about this question, and so there is a $30,000 cost associated with legal counsel on JP Morgan Chase's side. And then Darren, I don't know if you can go over some of the costs with PFM. We have a contract with PFM. We have Stradling as our legal counsel as well. So there are costs and, of course, staff time associated with these transactions.
Yep. And if we turn to the next slide, this kind of lists out some of the benefits of this recommended plan of finance here. So because we're recommending rolling the notes with a bank loan from JP Morgan, there's several benefits. And one of those, Director, is lower issuance expenses. Because it's a direct purchase or a loan with a bank, it's not a public issuance. We don't need to get disclosure, and we don't need ratings. So both of those save us money from a cost standpoint. The other benefit is that if the construction schedule is such that we don't complete all the projects by 2028 when the note comes due, we have additional flexibilities to roll the note directly with the bank. Now, there's no guarantee, obviously, there's a risk that the bank wouldn't want to roll it, but assuming that they do, it's a little bit more of a seamless process. If we had issued bonds in the capital markets, such as we did in 2022, we'd have to update disclosure, get new ratings. It's a more costly process from a cost of issuance standpoint. The other benefit from rolling the notes is that we have some pretty flexible provisions located within the documents. JP Morgan's actually able to provide us the ability to prepay the loan after 1 year of closing, so around May of 2026. So that's a very flexible feature for us. One of the main abilities, I know it was asked on the last board meeting, which was why not just do an interfund loan to pay off the notes? And the reason for that is because if we roll the notes in this manner, we preserve the ability to take the notes out with tax-exempt bonds in the future if for some reason, whatever reason, the USDA loans are not available or not utilized to repay the notes. If we paid the notes in another manner, we might lose that ability for tax-exempt refinancing in the future. So this plan of finance really preserves its ability to secure the lowest cost over the long run.
That doesn't, sorry to interrupt, this is John Egeler. That doesn't seem very likely to me that USDA money would go away. Now, we did talk about, at one of the previous meetings, there were some issues with USDA, and they had some concerns because the reserves were from their perspective, were so large. So as far as we know now, is the USDA loan and grant money that's in place now secure?
Well, in January, USDA was not having meetings with any agencies, and since then we have had meetings and we have provided project updates, and they have been more responsive. They did watch the board meeting from February 18th, and were very reactive to that, and has been working with staff, both engineering and finance staff, to make sure that we are moving forward with these projects in a more timely manner.
I think it's just difficult to project, how the new administration is going to handle pre-existing authorizations. It's beginning they're beginning. I don't know that they're focused on the Department of Agriculture yet. At least it doesn't seem to be something in the news. Health and Human Services seems to be taking the brunt of it right now. Defense is also involved. So it's hard for us to know. So I do believe it's good for us to preserve options moving forward.
Okay, so my question about the additional costs associated with this, I would call it a delay. So we had 30,000 for legal for JP Morgan. What else do we have?
So we'll have fee for bond counsel. We can follow up and finalize that. You've also got our fee, which is approximately 50 to 60,000. But these fees are cheaper than if we had to go out and do a public issuance because we don't need to secure ratings. We don't need to prepare a disclosure document. So from an issuance standpoint, or issuance cost standpoint, it's going to be more cost effective.
So roughly 100,000. I'm just gonna answer the question myself. Okay.
I just don't want to, yeah, Director, we can get back with a final, within the good faith that we bring, and I believe that's
That would be included in the April
April
22nd board meeting. We are
22nd. Yeah, we'll
finalizing all
have a
of those
good faith
agreements.
estimate that breaks that out. I just don't want to give you the wrong number.
Okay.
So you're not asking us today to do, bond financing. We're just gonna roll the note with a bank note
Correct.
and then preserve our option to do the bond for the larger projects at a later date.
Correct, yes. So if you recall, some of the larger projects for the new debt is Sun City and Talavera. Those projects are nearly complete with design and ready to be bid out this summer. So we'd like to have those cost estimates a little bit more solidified. And even if those construction projects start, let's say in December, January, we don't see a significant amount of dollars going out the door before May. And so we think we have enough funding internally until we have to do a debt issuance potentially in May to cover the ongoing construction project costs related to those particular projects. And worst case scenario, as we mentioned, we do an interfund loan if the projects were accelerated to a high degree.
Is there any additional information that you two think might be helpful when we bring this back for a full board vote?
No, I mean, the other, I don't want to go backwards, but the other question I would have is why did we do these bond notes in the first place? Why didn't we just do a bank loan? Would have been so much easier.
I don't know if you can answer that,
Well, I mean,
Darren.
like,
Yeah, no, I'm happy to provide some context there. So back in 2022, the decision was made from a cost standpoint. It was more cost effective. It was a lower interest rate to do bonds than go to the bank and secure bank loan financing. And at the time, I don't think there was as much of, well, it wasn't expected that the projects would be delayed the way that they have been. And so that was the reason for the public bond issues, just trying to keep the debt service cost the lowest as possible for the domestic water fund.
Okay.
I think the only other questions you're probably gonna get is the question that's been raised a couple times, which is why we can't use, internal loan proceeds rather than go through this process. So, other than that.
Yeah, I mean, I know you answered that question, but it was more of it might be a problem, and it's hard for us to evaluate how much risk we would be taking with that kind of
Right.
characterization. Because honestly, well, you don't know about the USDA
No.
commitment. Historically, it's been very solid, but who knows?
Right, and it's the preserving of the non-taxable bond issuance if we need it in the future, but also the USDA agreement does not clearly outline that an interfund loan is acceptable, and they have provided us some emails from the past, but they were provided after the 2022 financing was in place, and it's not in a formal letter or agreement that is signed and approved by the USDA, so.
I know. You would think, though, maybe they're watching. I mean, if they don't pay us any money until we're done with the project, they should give us some flexibility about how we get to the end of the project financially. Instead of saying, well, you can't do it. I mean, if they're not going to participate until the very end, then we should be able to do it, whatever works for us until we get there.
Agreed.
Yeah, you would think.
Agreed.
I mean, following the comments at the board meeting on the 18th, they did reach out to me. So, and I think I did mention at the previous meeting that if having a meeting that would involve a board member or a couple board members would help try to entangle this a bit, that offer is still on the table. So frankly, it doesn't, based on what we're hearing today, it doesn't sound like you've made much progress with that.
We
Not that it's
actually
your
had
fault.
a good meeting. Yeah, it was David, myself, and Sabrina actually did meet with them for an hour. I believe there was 8 or 9 USDA folks on the line, including those
Oh, boy.
that initially participated
8 or 9?
in 2022. So it was a very good response, and we did
We're still joining you.
and then about a week after they asked us for several documents, and so I feel like they have been paying attention and are more receptive and responsive to our needs at this point.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Next item.
Thank you, Darren.
Yep, thank you all.
Next one is Drew.
Who is he with?
Drew's with Foster and Foster. There are actuarial services that provide our actuarial reports for our other post-employment benefit trust or other post-employment benefits in general. Accounting regulations require us to do actuarial reports and disclosures for both the pension and the OPEB or other post-employment benefits. And we've asked Drew if he could assist with going over the actuarial report for the OPEB. The OPEB liability, sorry. I'm not sure if this was ever brought to the board before, but these are part of our auditing requirements at year end. So I don't know if we can,
Good morning.
PowerPoint.
right.
Can we switch to PowerPoint number 2, please? And then if we can get Drew on the screen as well. Thank you. Just
I don't have the clicker. Oh, okay.
Carla, can you hear me?
Yes, Drew, we can hear you. Thank you.
Would it be easier if I share my screen by chance? I know it's, I don't know if that's a possibility. I see our report, you see 2 pages at once. I've got it teed up to be 1 page, and I'm just going to go through about 5 or 6 pages anyway.
Yeah, unfortunately, Drew, we can't just because of
Okay.
our streaming and we're running.
Could you just kind of zoom in to the top page, and I'll just, this is do you have the other report? This is the GASB report.
So you need report number 3?
About,
Or
yeah.
two.
Okay, so the actuarial, okay, just
Yeah,
give us a
yep,
second.
that one.
Staff's gonna pull that one up, okay.
You can just want to start on the cover page.
It's like the same thing.
And then
You
go
could
to the
just-
next slide.
Yeah, if you could just zoom in so you can just see the top page there.
So Carla, let staff do it because you're doing it there and they're trying to do it, so don't touch that. Yolanda, can you go to the next slide and zoom in, please?
Sorry, I wish.
That's okay.
I would've sent you the one that's just 1 page at a time.
I think she had
Should
it
be
open.
number 3,
And you have 2 different reports, right?
that one.
Yeah, I'm just trying to catch up with which report he's looking at.
And
No,
then
you
go
have
to,
the same report twice, too.
Yeah.
It says actuarial
I have
valuation,
slightly
not
different
GASB.
information.
go to the next
Oh,
page.
okay.
But this,
No,
So
this
that
is
the
fine.
one
This
Oh,
we
that
have.
one? Okay, so it's
Yeah.
handout number
You don't
3
have
now.
your-
We skipped 2 and we're at handout 3.
Right, okay.
They're all numbered on the top right.
Yeah, I see it.
so John and John both have 2 twos.
Oh,
2
Well, that's
threes
not
and
good, is
0
it?
2s.
and there's a 3.
Same thing. Need that, need this one.
GASB one. Do we need it? I mean, maybe we
No,
don't
we're
need it.
skipping now. He's going to
I know,
this
but
one.
they don't have.
Okay,
One that
I'll
says
get those.
act-
sorry.
I've already looked at
Yeah.
it online.
Yeah, I don't know. Jeez.
Drew, can you see that?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I don't know if it's just because I'm on.
Well, we
One
have
of
our
3
copies
screens,
forever,
but-
so.
We have printed copies.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how it was uploaded. I don't know.
He doesn't have.
I mean, I can see it okay. I also have it on my other screen. If you just want me to go through and just list out what page I'm looking at. I'm only going to cover about 5 or 6 pages.
Okay.
It's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Carla kind of introduced us a little bit, but I'll give a little bit more background. My name's Drew Ballard. I'm an actuary with Foster and Foster. We're engaged with the district to provide the actuarial services for the district's retiree healthcare plan. So the benefits that are provided to your retirees at the time of the retirement, for those that are eligible to receive a subsidy for their post-retirement medical during their retirement. And what we do is, based on the GASB, Governmental Accounting Standard Board standards, you're required to do an actuarial evaluation every 2 years, which means we work with district staff to collect a lot of information, a census data as of a snapshot date and time, which the last one that was performed was June 30, 2023. So collecting all of the active employee information, your retirees, what medical plans they've elected. And our job is really to use that information and through our actuarial model, assign a liability to the benefits that we expect the district will pay on behalf of its employees and retirees in the future for the subsidies that are provided for their post-retirement medical. So, if you were to actually go to page one of the report, which is the benefit summary. So I think it's page 3 of the PDF, unfortunately. But yeah, page 1 of the PDF. I won't go over all the benefits that are provided, but as an example, if you retired before July 1st, 2011, you had more than 25 years of service with the district would basically pay 100% of the premium for any coverage that was elected, whether it was retiree only, two-party family. If you retired before July 1, 2011 with 15 to 24 years, there would be 100% of the premium for retiree only premiums. So our job is really to look at that information and to develop a model for what those benefits will be provided by the district on behalf of its retirees in the future, and determine a liability based on that snapshot point in time till June 3rd, 2023, to say, okay, we expect members to receive the benefits. We expect premiums to increase at a certain rate, and this is what we expect the district's payment to be to subsidize retiree premiums. So those benefits have obviously changed a little bit over the time. So now if you were hired after July 1, 2011, if you don't have 15 years of service, essentially you will not receive a benefit from the district for post-retirement benefits. So we're evaluating that, and we're updating our model every 2 years by collecting new data and assigning a liability to the future based on those benefits that we expect to be paid on behalf of the district. So that's really what we're going to talk about here. And if you go down to page 5, page 5 should talk about the funding policy. So actually, I'm not sure, I know one of the things we want to focus on today is the trusts that are in place to help pre-fund the liabilities and pay for those OPEB benefits, as well as your pension benefits with CalPERS. So the district actually pre-funded starting in fiscal 2014, contributed $10 million to a trust, and then did another $10 million in 2014 to 15. So essentially, the goal there is, okay, we're putting assets to work that are being invested to earn money over a long time to help lower the long-term cost of this liability and pre-fund that liability, so we'll be able to use those assets in the future to pay benefit payments instead of paying them out of the district's pocket, which has essentially been what the historical practice has been. We go forward a couple more pages, actually down to page 11. It should say market value of assets. So this is really just a reconciliation that shows the last 4 years of what the value of the assets have been in the trust that you've been using to build up to cover this liability and pre-fund for those benefit payments that are paid from the district to use in the future. So you can see, again, the district contributed an additional $500,000 in fiscal 20 and 2022, and then actually took a reimbursement for some of the benefit payments made in 2023 of $856,000. So at the end of the year, June 30, 23, which is the last time we did our full valuation, there was about $32.4 million in the Section 115 trust that is really designated to pay for post-retirement medical benefits. Okay, it's earmarked for that and must be used for that. So at some point, you're going to have to start making some decisions of, okay, do we continue to put more money in, or do we start taking money out to reimburse ourselves for the premium subsidies we're paying for our retirees? So just a couple of things to point out on this page. You can see there's quite a bit of volatility, obviously, in 2021-22, or 2021, the fund earned 26%. 2022, it lost about 13.65%. And in 23, it was up 8.8%. So based on our model, we're using a discount rate for those future benefit payments of 5.75%, which is the expected long-term rate of return on the assets that I think PFM is currently investing. So, you know, we expect those assets to increase over time, and that's what we do on the next slide, which actually page 13, is we can compare that to the liabilities. So the assets are separate. You know, we really don't have any involvement with that besides, you know, knowing what the values are. And our job is to develop the liabilities to compare to those assets to see what the funded status is of the plan. So on page 13 here, you can see that the funded percentage there is about 94.7% as of June 30, 2023. So, you know, very strong funded percentage based on, you know, really the district taking a pretty, what I would call a proactive approach to getting a trust started, you know, over 10 years ago, and really putting seed money of $20 million over 2 years into that trust, which you've obviously benefited from investment earnings over the last 10 years. And the liabilities have changed over time because you've restructured the benefit design. So people hired after a certain date aren't getting full premium. You know, I think it's 75% of premium, depending on the service, retiree only, sometimes full coverage. So we're really assigning liability. So the liability based on the current service that has been accrued for all of your employees. So retirees, obviously, is 100% of their service. Actives, depending on where they are, is about 35.56 million, which you can kind of see in the middle of the page. The assets on the actuarial smooth basis is about 33.6 million. So you've got an unfunded liability there of just under 1.9 million. So that's how we come up with that 95% funded ratio. So very strong there. So I think that from a long-term budgeting and strategic standpoint, really what the district needs to start thinking about now that you're 100% funded is, what do we do with the money that exists in our current approach? So if we could actually go down to page 17.
And Drew, before you continue, on the other report, the roll forward evaluation as of June 30th, 2024, the funded ratio is at 99%. So just
Okay.
wanted to point that out, and the liability is went down by about $1 million to $184,000.
Fantastic. Let me just, so that is actually as of measurement date June 30, 24. So we actually were able to capture the 2024 change in the assets. Just looking at, I don't think we have the return, but
Okay.
you didn't take any money out of the trust that year or put any additional money into it. But obviously, I think 2024 was a pretty good investment year. Helpers earned, I think, about 10% that year. So that did help close the gap on that funded status. So on page 17, and this is kind of where I'll wrap up and turn it over to you guys for any questions. What we do here is a projection of what we expect that funded ratio to be over the next 10 years, and based on a couple of assumptions. So right now, based on what the district has typically been doing in the past, is making all the pay-go benefit payments for those medical subsidies out of district assets, not putting we're assuming there's no additional contributions going to the trust, and that you're not reimbursing yourself for those benefit payments. So essentially, the trust is there, and it's whatever, we're assuming it's going to earn 5.75% per year, and there's no additional money going in or out. Okay, based on that assumption and projecting liabilities forward, you can see that in fiscal 26 and fiscal we would expect that the fund to be over 100% funded and continue to grow. And that's really because, you know, the assets are growing, and you're not taking money out of the trust to reimburse yourself for those benefit payments that are made. At some point, you know, you don't want to let this get too far overfunded, because it has to be designated to pay those post-retirement medical benefits. So you want to start pulling out of the trust to pay the benefit payments, to reimburse yourself from those benefits that are made from district assets. So that's really what the ultimate objective was when you started this trust 10 years ago, is that at some point you're going to use, you know, the assets that have been growing to pay for the benefit payments for your retirees instead of paying it out of pocket. So you've earned, you know, you've saved yourself money over the long term by investing in a trust that's earning assets and performing better than what you would get in your general fund. I hope that was good, like 10-minute overview. And I know you guys got a lot to talk about with your OPEB and pension trusts, but I did want to kind of just go over what I felt was important stuff to cover from the valuation and give you an idea of where the liability is, where your funded status is as of our last valuation, and where we expect it to go forward. So you have some things to decide on how you want to strategically, you know, use this trust going forward to help the district pay for some of those benefit payments that you're making to your retirees.
Perfect, thanks, Drew.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think that's going to be covered in the next slide.
We'll continue the discussion
Yeah.
on the next
Yeah, 'cause
presentation,
I
yes.
might have a few things to say,
Hey,
but let's get.
Carl, I didn't plan on going over the Gadget 75 just because it doesn't really deal with the funding part of it. It's really the accounting requirements, right? What's going into your financial report. But if you would like me to
No.
run through that at all.
No, that's okay, Drew. Just a couple of things to point out since this last valuation. If you recall, in July, the board approved new medical benefits for 2025, and we did not go forward with the Anthem plans, and with the Anthem, and instead did the Aetna, and those had a 0% increase for 3 years, I believe. And so that would affect the valuation. That would be a lower benefit, or lower costs, for those benefits. And so those types of things affect the valuation. And then the PFM long-term rate of return has been higher than the 5.75. It's actually been 7.56%. And so although the valuation has a discount rate of 5.75%, the trust itself has been outperforming that.
Right, until today.
Yes.
Good.
Until recently, yes. There's some
A little rain
volatility,
cloud.
and we'll be talking about hedging that volatility going forward in the next presentation. Any questions for Drew that you might
I
have?
guess you're going to be addressing this, as John says, as we continue, but, so are you asking for a recommendation on an amount that we're going to pre-fund again, or is that question not even on the table?
There's no option to add additional funding to the OPEB trust. However, during the next presentation, I'll cover how we want to draw down on funds and how we anticipate to still continue, as Drew mentioned, to have a very strongly funded OPEB trust, even with those draws.
Okay.
All right. Good. All right. Thank you,
Definitely.
Drew. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Now we have
Have a good day.
Mitch.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Sorry, Keith.
So here with us in person for the next presentation, we have Ryan, and then also on the line we have Mitch, and I'm not sure if anyone from PFM Investment Strategies is on the call.
Actually. we
Either
have a-
Keith, Perry, or
I have Keith,
Roberto?
Mitch hasn't accepted on the thing, so I'm waiting on Mitch.
no
There
problem.
he goes.
Hi, Carla, it's Keith. I'm on.
Hi, Keith.
That's just me.
What's the percentage? That doesn't mean-
I'll do the clicking here. So
Hey,
if
Mitch.
you recall, we brought forth a presentation on December 10th, 2024 to the board regarding the topic of establishing a new pension trust. During our analysis, we determined that PARS had the best option for the district. PARS has been an administrator, trust administrator since 1984. The assets would still continue to be managed and invested by PFM, our current partner with the OPEB trust that we have. They have actually partnered with PARS and have indicated that if we merge our assets with PARS, we would get better customer service with our portfolio and lower cost because of the overall amount in the portfolio if we combine both the OPEB and the new pension contribution trust. The custody bank would be U.S. Bank. And we did bring forth today two, can you hear me? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Two investment policies that are proposed for this combined trust for both pension and OPEB. And we did attach those to the staff report. We'll go over those at a very high level. Make sure the board likes the strategies that we're proposing to bring forth in May. And then also talk about some of the investment contributions going forward. So these are the 10 steps required to establish the PARS trust. The one highlighted in yellow are the two investment strategies or the investment policies. Normally those are done outside of board discussion by staff, but recognizing that the board normally approves these policies, we brought them forth today, and we will be bringing them forth when we bring forth the resolutions to actually establish the trust. So give you a high-level overview of what those two policies include. On the left are your asset classes where we can invest these funds. The current OPEB trust is invested in a balanced portfolio option that looks very similar to what the new pension trust portfolio recommendation would look like. Again, that's how we started. The OPEB trust with no funding. Now we're at 100% funding. And so we'd like to minimize the volatility, as we discussed during the previous presentation, and go down to a moderate strategy, just kind of in the middle. So reducing our exposure to those equities a little bit and just preserving the current balance that we have even with the draws. And then doing the strategy on the pension trust similar to what we did with the OPEB trust when that was initiated. And Mitch or team, I'm not sure if you want to add any additional comments on this particular slide in the investment strategies.
I believe Ryan Nicasio is there in person. Carla, is that correct?
Yes, he's here.
Okay.
Or
Ryan,
does the
go
board
ahead.
have any questions about the strategies?
Just a comment. I read this ahead, and it's an interesting recommendation when you have something that's been working really well that we better change that. Why not keep what we have?
If you recall, when we did the OPEB overview at the last meeting, we talked a lot about reducing the equities slightly below the target rate because of the volatility that we currently have and not wanting to expose ourselves more than needed. We could keep it the same. We are proposing to remove.
Volatility is important when you have a short time horizon. Not as big a deal when you have a long horizon, and these things are in place in perpetuity as far as I can tell. So that seems like a long horizon to me.
Yeah, just overall, generally speaking, you do have the ability to sort of make investment changes as you see fit. I think the initial discussion was that based on the funding status of the OPEB and how it's grown to close to 100%, maybe it'd be worthwhile to take a little bit risk and also include taking out disbursements to bring that down.
And I agree with the disbursement part, obviously, because otherwise we're going to be, we're already going to be super funded. But I would entertain an alternative as just keeping it where it is because it's been working.
Yeah. Hi, this is Keith Stribling. I just wanted to add that, when we had this conversation, things were a bit different then. Interest rates were closer to 4 and almost 4.5%, and stock market was higher. And the idea was that reducing the risk because of the overly funded status and with interest rates as high as they were, it would be still pretty easy to achieve the returns. But as somebody noted in the, it's not been a great month and a half, and stocks are much lower and interest rates are much lower. So maybe the rationale for hedging is less prevalent.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting, I was wondering why, and then Carla, you mentioned, well, we've already gotten to where we're funded now. But it's not like we're going to retire, you know. I mean, you think about people changing their investment strategy when they get close to retirement age. You know, I'm just talking about individuals. And that makes sense, but that's not what we're doing here. We have another strategy to draw down this fund so that we don't keep going above 100%. And you can do that, and you can still have an aggressive investment strategy. You don't need, I just don't see the logic in saying, well, we've arrived, so we should just reduce our risk and eliminate volatility, or reduce volatility, and it's going to reduce our long-term returns also, but that shouldn't be a strategy. We can draw those funds down without reducing our returns.
Yeah, that's up to the board, and that's
Just don't
why
make
we
sense to
wanted
me.
to bring it forth for
Yeah.
discussion, so
Yeah.
that then when we brought it, the final policies, we incorporated your recommendations from the finance committee perspective.
So does this option, with the market volatility that we're seeing, does it tie into that? Is it more protection, less protection,
It's assumed to be more protection.
more protection?
Just by the fact that there's, moved roughly 10% out of stocks and into fixed income makes it just more conservative.
Yeah,
Not a lot.
I agree with that characterization, but
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, and I don't disagree with you. Just the thinking at the time was taking advantage of where interest rates were and
Yeah.
relatively, somewhat high valuations of the stock market at that time. I think it's less as important today.
yeah, I agree with you. No,
Things change fast.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I completely agree. Okay.
Yeah. One other consideration, this is Mitch Barker with PARS, is if you do drop down a notch from balanced to moderate, which is roughly 50-50, then the actuary potentially will make a change in the discount rate. And there's a teeter-totter effect, right? So when you lower your investment strategy potential return, you increase your UAL potentially. So that would be potentially an argument for not dropping a notch. Like you said, you're thinking longer term, and staying where you are keeps the discount rate where you are, so things would, in a sense, be status quo. So.
And did I read where if we do this helps our rating?
Our overall credit rating
Yeah.
with like S&P, they definitely monitor if the funded ratios for all of your liabilities, including the pension and OPEB. And so establishing the new pension trust would certainly help in that regard. And continuing to have a 100% funded OPEB liability would also assist long-term with credit ratings, absolutely. Okay, so what I'm hearing is we want to keep them the same, and so we'll,
Well, I think that would be an alternative.
Okay.
I don't know if this is something that goes to the board or not.
Personally, John, I'd like to see us have a full board discussion on this.
okay.
Okay?
So
Easy enough.
we could present both options, and then at the board meeting can decide which policy, the section in the policy that addresses the strategy, the investment strategy is one page within the policy, can easily be revised, and we could adopt the policy that the board determines is appropriate at that meeting.
I mean, it's,
Okay.
and we shouldn't really be sort of reflexive. I mean, if the market were up 5% today instead of down 5%, I might have said something different. So, I mean, between now and the next board, when we take this up at a board meeting, we might feel differently also. I mean, who knows? It is
Volatile.
Well, you're aiming. What I'm, or maybe we're getting to this. We are. Yeah. Go ahead. Continue.
Okay. So this is just a reminder, we did bring this forth in December about the current accrued liability. It's about $156 million for the pension trust. And if we had the funded goal of 80%, we have a shortfall of about 47.7 million. We have three different, oh, oh. Perry, do you want to say something regarding the funded or the market investment strategies?
Yes, can you hear
Okay.
me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yes. So as we looked at this is a little bit of a, a splitting hairs somewhat from these two allocations because they are fairly close. Obviously the 50-50 going, 10% less in the equity markets should reduce risk over time. The 60-40 is not, by any means, is not over aggressive. I would slightly just kind of categorize it just past a moderate type of approach like the 50-50. So really, I think the simplest way to put it, either allocation will not hurt you. It was just a simple fact of being overfunded seemed like a good time to maybe talk about taking some of the risk off the table. But with that being said, you are investing over the long term, from a perpetuity standpoint. So the 60-40 allocation has allowed you to hit, the actuarial numbers from a standpoint of the hurdle rate and your overall funding status being over it. I think the biggest thing you have to ask yourselves as you go to make the decision between these two allocations is, are you able to stomach and, like what the market being down 5% today and knowing that you have, 10% more equity exposure today than, reducing down to 50-50. It more comes down to kind of your level of reaction when markets are down and you've lost some off the top. Like if so far working with you, there's been no overreaction to the markets over from the time that we've been investing this. So I believe as long as the board has that viewpoint where there's not a major overreaction, staying in 60-40 is not, it's not an outrageous decision by any means. You're fine there. And like I said, if you want to reduce some risk and you go down to 50-50, we believe that will also meet your needs over time.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Perry. So as I was saying, we have a budget of about 7 million. We looked at different funding strategies for the pension trust, and then also took into account we have a lot of competing demands for our funds. We would like to propose that we do a $5 million contribution versus the $7 million that's currently budgeted. A lot of the amount is would come from the domestic fund, almost 44% of it. It's distributed amongst the funds depending on where the payroll liabilities land each budget cycle. And so that would certainly alleviate some of the pressure from each one of these funds allocated across the board. But then also it would potentially, based on current projections and what we know today, take care or draw down the total liability within a 10-year time frame. It's very similar to the OPEB trust. This is a long-term liability. It's not going away. If we wanted to terminate the CalPERS benefit, it would be about $1 billion to terminate that liability, which is probably not something we would be considering anytime soon. And so again, similar to the OPEB trust, this would be a long-term investment to offset those liabilities in the future and have also the interest savings associated with that. And the interest savings would be realized if the contributions were sent to CalPERS. So, does that make sense? The three different strategies.
I saw that and I didn't quite know what interest we're saving there. If you could help me understand that.
That comes directly from the CalPERS valuation reports, and I didn't attach the report, but we did go over it during the last meeting. If you have funds that you send directly to CalPERS, then the liability reduces, and then you won't pay the interest on that liability.
Okay.
Yeah. So
But when you pay the interest, you pay it to yourself, right?
it's for your own liability, yeah,
But the money goes into the fund.
into the fund.
It doesn't go
Right.
somewhere else.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not sure that.
But having a level contribution and then allowing for the 60-40 investment strategy that's a little bit balanced or a little bit more I don't want to say the word aggressive, but it also allows us to earn that interest within the OPEB trust, and then offset the liability when we do our financial reporting for the pension.
So this decision, let's say we decide to do that 5 million for 10 years, is that something every year we can take a new look at it? It's not a commitment, it's a strategy.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Just like this year's budget includes the 7 million, and we're proposing to not do the full 7. We could, if the board would like to do so, but we're just seeing a lot of pressure within all of the funds.
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me.
Yeah. And, sorry, this one does include, and highlight that there would be no additional contributions to the OPEB trust under what we're proposing
Of course.
Yeah, right.
for the health benefits. And then this is a similar slide on the OPEB side, again, highlighting the fact that the current liability is only about $184,000. And if we wanted to lower the funded ratio to 80%, we're actually currently overfunded by about $7.2 million. I always think it's harder to catch up and get back to 100%. So my goal would be to kind of keep us around that target. And we have drawn down the last 2 fiscal years from the fund, $856,000 and then $856,350. We're going to hover around there, about $900 to $1 million. And so the next couple of slides indicate how that would impact the funded ratio of the OPEB trust. And this is just one of those the valuation or recommendations is just solidify that what we're doing with withdrawing the funds is an appropriate strategy for us.
Right.
What are those reimbursements for, sorry?
They're for healthcare benefits. Our current healthcare benefits are about $1.6 million per year. And so we've been refunding or reimbursing ourselves for about 50% of those costs the last 2 fiscal years.
50%.
Is that 80%, is that a board policy?
No board policy. It was discussed. And again, like I mentioned, we're currently at 100%. It'd be nice to stay at 100%. If we drew down about $900,000 for the next 5 years, we could easily stay at about the 100% funded ratio over the next 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to get to the point where you have nowhere to go with the money. I mean, you might
Right.
you might be able to cover 100% of your health OPEB and still be over 100% funded, and we don't want that. So I think it's wise to try to get it below 100.
Our unfunded liability numbers are really good. And I gotta think that when a rating agency is looking at these numbers, they're looking at it quite favorably in terms of what they would rate us. I keep coming back to that because that's
Right.
directly related to how much interest we're gonna pay. So I think it's.
Right,
it's a
for
good-
debt.
I think the
Absolutely.
80%
Yeah.
on this came from the goal of 80% on the pension.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we can, obviously there's a little horse trading here because what you save on one side, you pay on the other. I know it's
Yeah.
slightly different, but it's probably hitting, like you showed, it hit domestic 44%. The other one's probably hitting at about 40% also.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Same allocation.
So you end up moving it from one bucket to the other.
Yes.
Yeah.
And these next
Effective.
4 slides, it just on the column on the far left, it talks about the annual distribution amounts. We played with a couple different numbers there, what the current ending balance would be after the 5 years. And then also if we're assuming that there will be actuarial changes or increases to the liability versus not. And then one of the things to note here is that we all know healthcare benefits will continue to rise. And so on that 4th or 5th column, it lists the projected liability after those 5 years and then the funded ratio to the far right. Again, no additional contributions with any of these scenarios, but you could easily see this is a $1.3 million drawdown. This is $1.8 million, which is higher than our current retiree benefits. And this is about where we are between the 600,000 and the 1.1, and the funded ratio still stays at or above the 80%. So again, we would continue to monitor that and then budget accordingly, and draw down based on what actually happens in the market and what that funded ratio looks like. But for budget purposes, we do budget the reimbursement from the OPEB liability in the current budget list of about $856,000 again for this fiscal year. So the next plan of action for this particular item would be to bring it back to the board at the May 13th meeting. Between now and then, we would work on the resolutions. We would bring forth 2 potential investment strategies for the OPEB to select one of the 2, and then bring forth a similar presentation and any other additional information that you think the board would like to make a final determination on the funding strategies, the investment strategies, and go ahead and open up the PARS Trust.
Yeah. So it's a trust that does both,
Correct.
pension and the health.
Mhm. And Mitch, can you explain that and how the funds are maybe, or I don't know if you can, Ryan? Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, unique to PARS is we have this combination 115 trust that allows districts such as yourself to pre-fund liabilities for one or the other, or for both. From an administrative standpoint, we segregate or sub-account for those assets separately because you can only use OPEB assets for OPEB liabilities, pension for pension. But the nice thing is you have this an all-in-one combination trust.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
And you have the flexibility with regard to, having separate investment strategy selections for those 2. And what we were sort of discussing earlier is you always have the ability to revisit and make a change. That's where we would recommend having a discussion with Keith and Perry from PFM Asset Management to discuss those changes in district goals to sort of align and make sure, you're not making reactionary decisions to the market. These are aligning with your long-term goals for funding with both.
Yeah, just to add also, it aggregates for fee purposes.
Right.
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
bill.
So we save.
Yes.
Yeah. And our goal would be to do all of this before the June 30th, by the end of the fiscal year.
Next item.
Any other questions or, no? Okay.
Thank you.
Nope, just me.
This is all you, huh?
All me.
Well, so far, so good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Oops. Sorry, Yolanda. Yolanda's trying to help me and I'm not letting her. All right. So we did want to also discuss some of the other activities that we are actively working on as a finance department that will be coming forth to the full board in an open session within the next couple of months. We have a draft form of the fee study associated with the cross-connection backflow, new backflow requirements. We're proposing to do a phase 1 and 2 when we issue that RFP because a full fee study for the miscellaneous fees was already anticipated to start in 2026. And rather than having to issue 2 RFPs and potentially select 2 different consultants, we'd like to merge those 2 phases together and issue 1 contract for maybe a 3-year term to do both the current need to evaluate what the backflow fees are and what the board, to give us some direction with that from a fee perspective so that then we can implement a full program for the cross-connection program, and then also start to look at the miscellaneous fee study in all of it, encompassing all of the fees, and then potentially also revisit the backflow fees as part of that full study. The other RFP that we are going to be issuing in April is for a cost of service study for both the domestic, East, West, and Mission Creek replenishment funds. The current rates expire July 1st of 2025, so with this budget cycle will be the final Prop 218 fee structure that we have, and so we'll have to do a new cost of service study, new Prop 218 with these the new cost of service studies. So we're proposing to start those studies in early summer of 2025. We also have been looking at financial policies, when they were last updated, what potential updates we would need to those policies. They're listed here on the screen. We have 1 new one. We don't have a cash management policy. And so we would potentially draft that as a new policy to clarify the internal controls and approvals for things like paying our debt, utilities, permits, et cetera. They are referenced within the procurement policy, but there's no thresholds in a lot of these. We have to pay our utilities, we have to pay our debt. And so just solidifying what that cash management policy looks like. However, also within these financial policies is a potential change to the framework of the policies that we'd like to have some direction on, or maybe some discussion on here at the Finance Committee level. We could potentially start to incorporate or develop handbooks for each one of these policies versus just a policy. Current policies include some of these handbook items, such as procedures or examples, clarifications for staff, frequently asked questions. However, the handbooks would not be updated or taken to the board. Those would be updated internally. And if I can give you an example, our investment policy right now lists who administers the investments, but it doesn't tell you which bank we have, who has access to do wires, who approves the wires, who does the bank reconciliation. And we did not want that in a public document because that would potentially lead to additional fraud attempts within the district and our staffing. So that would be one example. Or within the procurement policy, it could list the types of procurements like an RFP and RFQ, but the handbook would list how you actually administer those. Who does them? How many people are on the evaluation panel? Things of that nature. And whereas the policy would be a higher level framework and decision making with thresholds and who is actually responsible for the duties within the policies, but the handbook itself would be an internal document that we can update as either our bank changes or our ERP system changes as we're currently going through. But just wanted maybe some thoughts on taking out some of those things from policies that would be more aligned with the handbook.
So what's generating this? What?
It's our auditors and us would like to have, and we do currently have, it's just not as,
Black and white.
yeah, it's not clearly documented. And so as we move forward, as we've had staff changes, there's a lot of times where those that don't leave behind a clear trail of how items are done. And so for audit purposes as well, it would be nice to have an official handbook that staff can administer these policies with.
Yeah,
Sounds fun to me. I don't have
I don't know.
yeah, if you want a handbook, go do it. Yeah, it's fine.
It would just be a redlined edit of some of the policies. I can think of the procurement policy and specifically would remove some of the content, and we could clearly let you know where it's going within a handbook.
Can we do this internally without having to hire somebody?
Yes.
Consultant? To do this?
Right.
But that's good. The only other comment I have is that there seems to be a lot of work described in your financial management activity report. And it just seems like, I'm sure you're gonna have to prioritize these somehow. That's really up to you guys, but it seems like a lot.
It is a lot. And some of these policies, like if we're going to be issuing debt officially through a bond issuance, the debt management policy would be one of the first ones. So we would tackle them in that priority order. But the best time to update policies is when you don't have to. And so right now we don't have any issues, and so you want to take a look at those policies and work through them and potentially at least do 2 a year. Not saying these are going to be done overnight, but it definitely wanted to recognize that we should be revisiting these on a more frequent basis. And we do have external auditors and legal that would also review these with our edits so that we can affirm that we're currently following all of the accounting regulations, internal controls, and that legal is in agreement with what we're proposing to bring to the board for any edits.
Yeah, I think that's good stuff, good housekeeping.
And then we're also working on the Assembly Bill 2257 with Michael Colantano regarding an ordinance to be adopted by the board for administrative remedies for challenges to rates, charges, and assessments prior to us adopting any future cost of service studies. One of the major impacts here is that we would potentially need to change when or how things like our budget and our fees or even our engineering report are adopted, because a public hearing process would be required for every one of those, adding time to the actual process of adopting those reports. So right now, our engineering report is due by May 1st, and it's being brought to the board in April. That may need to change to like a February date, which then means we would need to start our budget process like in November versus in January. So with this potential ordinance, we would be highlighting some of those changes that we would need to make internally in order to accommodate the public hearing process. But it would also alleviate us from potentially future legal liabilities. So another little task we're working on to bring forth to the board. And then
I mean,
we
that
also.
sounds really, that
Yes.
sounds like you will have a less accurate budget if we're gonna have to do it that
We
way.
won't have mid-year numbers.
Right. We'd have to do some forecasting and definitely include maybe additional budget adjustments within quarterly reports. It's not just an impact on finance, but it's on other departments. And so we've been working with Scott Brewitt and Joanne and those that would be impacted by this change so that they understand and are in agreement with the changes that they would need to make going forward as well. And then we also have our external audit firm, LSL, will be doing our interim audit. We're already working on these items the week of May the 12th, and then we have our inventory audit at our main warehouses on May 19th, and then our final audit is scheduled for the 2 weeks after Labor Day. We are proposing to bring forth a update on how that interim audit goes in July, and if you'd like, LSL can also be available for comments and share any concerns or questions or, and just an update on how the interim audit and inventory audit went during the month of May. And we are also in full swing with our Workday and SpryPoint implementations. As a reminder, the board will be getting their quarterly update at the second meeting in April. So I won't steal their thunder, but we're doing really, really well. And we're targeting a Workday go live for financials July 1st, 2026. So a little over a year from now. We're currently working on configuration, some initial testing, reviewing of the initial data that was put into both platforms. So all staff is all hands on deck with these particular projects. And SpryPoint is set to go live September of 2026. And then we also have a final third phase for Workday for our financial long-term planning budget models that would go live in December of 2026 with a full wrap-up by early 2027.
And just a reminder, the SpryPoint is the customer billing, and the Workday
Yes.
is pretty much
Thank you.
everything.
The financials, yes.
So Carla and Scott Burrett and
Luis.
Luis, and with a lot of coordination with Dan, because Dan's got quite a large portion of the district operations. I'm really impressed with how they're pulling it together.
Good.
We've got some good support, folks, thanks to the board, so. Fingers are crossed. You never know until you actually do the cutover.
Yes. And if a question, if there's any additional items the board would like to see during our next meeting that's scheduled for July, other than those mentioned
Is it already
already.
scheduled?
I don't know if it's,
No, it's not.
we're tentatively, I think, looking at July and then
October.
November. I think October, November.
Yeah, we initially had 5, and we said that was too many. So
We're hoping to bring forward the P card policy in July. We can talk about the interim audit, potentially the debt management policy as well.
Okay.
Yeah, going for part of July, but,
Yeah, I'm gone the week of the 21st.
I'll send you an email.
Yeah.
Availability.
yeah, me too.
You're gone the week of the 21st.
I'm leaving on the 14th, coming back on the 25th.
Oh, okay. 2 weeks.
I mean, we could go in first this week,
Yeah, absolutely. No, it doesn't have to be July. We'll coordinate on dates.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe the last week of July.
Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that was a good meeting. Do we have anything else before the committee?
Not for
Hearing none?
today.
Not at this time. Hearing none.
Hearing none, we are adjourned.